In today's society, the coin of the realm is real clear. Years ago, back in Jesus' day, they had silver coins. They had some mostly silver, some lead coins. But today, if we look at what the coin of the realm is, it's clearly materialism and how to get more stuff. You know, success is measured by what you drive, where you live, you know, how much finances that you have, and that's how people measure you nowadays. When I was growing up as a kid, and most of you are younger than me. Hey, I remember my brother. I just got back from Arizona. My brother brought up a picture of. I've got two younger brothers. Mom goes a sale on some material, striped material, red and blue stripes on a white background, and she made all three of us shirts out of the same material. I'm the luckiest because I was the oldest of three brothers. So when I outgrow stuff, it went to brother number 2. And brother number 3, he never looked good. I mean, by the time he grew into stuff, it was all, now, but who does that nowadays? Nobody does. You know, but today we measure success by pretty much materialism. That is epitomized in a movie that you probably saw in 1996, or at least I'm sure you've heard of it, Jerry Maguire. Jerry Maguire was an award-winning movie starring Tom Cruise, Cuba Gooding Jr., and it was, the premise of the story was Tom Cruise was a sports agent, and he's trying to keep athletes signed up because he gets a percentage of whatever he signs for their contract. And we're going to take a very, very brief look at this shot from Jerry Maguire, 1996. You remember? You remember that movie? At the time in 1996, that was probably, you think, well, that's quite an exaggeration. How much of an exaggeration is it today? 96 doesn't seem that long ago. I know it is, but hey, the things that we do for money, that people do, is amazing. In a book, The Day America Told the Truth, it's a book by James Patterson and Peter Kim. They published statistics about how far people would go for $1 million. What would they do for $1 million? Okay? And this is in America. 25% would abandon their entire family. Doggone, 25%. Now, some of these numbers to me I can understand. Some are very surprising. 23% would engage in some questionable ethical conduct. 23% for a week or more. 16% would give up their American citizenship for $1 million? You gotta be kidding. 16% would leave their spouses? Don't look at me. I would never do that. It's only $1 million. 10% would withhold testimony and let a murderer go free. Doggone. Of course, that means 90% would not. 7% would kill a stranger. And the last one does surprise me a little bit. So only 3% would put their children up for adoption. Guess it depends on your kids. But only 3%. That's what America would do for $1 million. Now, what would you do for $10,000? A radio station, WKOX in Chicago, posed that question. They had a contest. And they were going to give one of their listeners on this radio station $10,000. And they wanted to, what would you do for $10,000? They got 6,000 entries for this contest. The winner was a young man. His name is Jay Watney, and he was a sophomore at Indiana State University. He won the $10,000. And the way he won it, he came dressed in a tux, had a table all set up with china, sterling silver, a crystal, a rosebud in the middle, and he agreed to eat an 11-foot, 4.5-inch diameter spruce tree from the top to the roots. And he did. Armed with a pruning shears, he started at the top of the tree and started eating everything, the bark, the branches, all the way down. The only condiment he used was French dressing for a huge salad for the leaves, at the end. And he did receive the $10,000 in his tux. Took him 3 days to eat it. 18 hours and 3 days to eat it. At the end, when he was receiving his check, he had a very upset stomach. Evidently, the bark was worse than his bite. I had to say that. I had to say that. Okay. In reality, now you wouldn't do that for $10,000, I don't think. In reality, that's true. None of this I'm making up. In reality, we all make choices every day involving materialism. Here's a few real examples. What's going to happen in a little over 6 months from now? Tax day. April 15th is a little over 6 months from now. You're trying to tell me something. Okay. We have a CPA do it, so this I can say this honestly. Somewhere between 30 and 40% of all Americans, including Christians, regularly cheat on their income taxes. 30 to 40% regularly cheat on their income taxes. Doggone. Some of you are saying I'm missing out. I have a friend that works at the IRS here in Kansas City. And she says they have a board where they keep track of some of the most ridiculous deductions that people claim. And so she gave me, some are not quite so ridiculous, but some of them are. These are some real deductions that she's seen that have been filed on income tax form. Gym memberships. How do you deduct a gym membership? But they do. Country club dues, deductions. Cosmetic surgery. I don't think Botox falls under the classification of a prescription drug. A wedding, but clients were invited. Wrote it off. Good luck with that. By the way, all these were caught. Gambling winnings are taxable, but losses are deductible. So some gamblers actually go to the track and pick up the losing tickets that are on the floor and claim them. Who would have thought of that? And claim them for deductions as losses, because you can write off your losses as long as you claim your winnings. So that's something they've seen regularly. Veterinarian bills as a deduction for pets. But of course, the pet was listed as a dependent. Now, some of them, you feel like your pet should be a dependent, maybe what you spend on those vet bills, but not deductible. If you knew you wouldn't be audited, would you fill your tax form out any differently? You wouldn't be audited. Well, if you're making $1 million or more, you're 11 times more likely to be audited than the average American. If you're making $1 million or more, most of us don't have to worry about that. If you're making $200,000, again, $200,000, your odds are 4 times more likely to be audited than the average American. Again, we're reasonably safe. Of the 1,000 largest companies in the United States, at any one particular time, half those companies are under audit throughout the year. So of the 1,000 largest companies, but you better keep their numbers right, because half of them are being audited at any one given time. The IRS uses the same concept as the famous bank robber. Was it Willie Sutton? I think his name was Willie Sutton. And you go where the money is. So the IRS is going where the money is. But 30 to 40% of everybody regularly cheat on their income taxes. Okay, here's another example. Your employer. You wouldn't think of taking office supplies home, but what about time? You're paid for sick days, and some folks use them when they want time off. After all, it is use it or lose it. Or maybe internet browsing at work. Long lunches. Or consistently arriving to work a few minutes late each morning. I'm sure most of you don't do that at all. However, you might be thinking, it's not really cheating. Everybody does it. Well, what about cheating? Cheating is rampant in our schools. So I was doing this lesson. I was doing research on some of these subjects, because what do I know? And there's a 2013 Wall Street Journal study found that 30% of elementary school kids regularly cheat. 30%. By the time they get to high school, the number jumps to 74%. Not once in a while, but regularly cheat, 74%. Technology has allowed us to have smartphones where we can research other people's work. You can download a term paper that somebody else did on virtually any subject. So it's relatively easy, but I was really surprised about these numbers. When I was in school, the teachers were pretty sharp. You know, I still got marks on my knuckles from Mrs. Barr with a ruler. She would snap that ruler on your knuckles. Some of you remember that. You know, nowadays she'd get thrown in jail. But in those days, the teachers, they maintained stuff. And they knew writing stuff on your palm, that wasn't going to work. Before a test, we'd have to put our hands up like this. Mrs. Barr would check to see that nobody had anything written on her hands. So, but that was about as far as anybody would go. 74% regularly cheat when they get to high school. Doggone. Today, cheating is much more accepted. It's easier and much more accepted by your peers than what it was when I was in school. If you cheated back then, everybody knew it, and you had that kind of reputation. Remember the TV show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? In 2001, a gentleman by the name of Charles Ingram stole the most money ever on a game show on TV, $1 million. He cheated and got $1 million. How did he do it? Well, when I can't think of who the MC was on that show. Who was the MC on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Regis. Yes, thank you. Regis Fillmore. When he would read Mr. Ingram would read the question back and the four possible choices. In the audience, on one side was his mother, and on the other side was his cousin. And at the appropriate A, B, C, or D, they would cough. And just one little cough. Luckily, this wasn't during flu season. They would cough, and he would say, well, it's number C. And they awarded him $1 million check. Unfortunately for Mr. Ingram, prior to him cashing the check, they figured out his scheme and got the money back. But they did write the check to him. The last example. Transparency International is a non-governmental international organization that monitors and publicizes corporate and political corruption. It recently interviewed 114,000 people in 107 countries and found over half believe bribery and corruption has significantly increased in the last 2 years. Significantly increased in the last 2 years. This is 107 countries, 114,000 people. Some of the results is amazing. As a result, worldwide trust is declining in governments and organizations of authority. What a surprise. 1 in every 4 people that Transparency International, of the 114,000, 1 in every 4 people paid a bribe in the last 12 months when assessing public institutions and services. 1 in 4 paid a bribe? The study found 73% of the citizens of Israel believe their country's government is motivated by a small group of individuals with ulterior motives. In the United States, that figure dropped to 64%. 64%. Mexico, 62%. Greece, who's having a lot of problems, 83%. The study's conducted every single year, but the last 2 years, a significant increase in bribery and corruption is going on. Anyone heard of a gentleman by the name of Tom Joyner? He's a, I wish I'd have known that before I was doing this class. Pardon? Okay, Tom Joyner. Only one person knows. Very good. Tom Joyner is he's called the hardest working man on radio. His salary is in excess of $700,000. For 8 years, this was his daily schedule. Hard-working guy. He wakes up at 3:30 in the morning. At 5:30 in the morning, Joyner comes on the air at K104 in Dallas to do a 3.5 hour morning drive time talk show on the radio. So he gets up at 3:30. At 5:30, he comes on the air and does a 3.5 hour morning drive time show. Shortly after 9 o'clock, he's driven to DFW Airport, Dallas Airport. He flashes his $150,000 American Airlines Air Pass and sits down in first class, always seat 4A. On Flight 360 for the 2-hour flight to Chicago, every day, he carries only his briefcase and his lunch. At O'Hare in Chicago, a limo picks him up, rushes him to a local health club for a quick workout. He then dashes to the studios, the radio station WGCI, where he's on the air in Chicago from 2 in the afternoon until 6 for the afternoon commute crowd. Then it's back to O'Hare to catch his return flight to Dallas. He touches down at DFW around 9 o'clock in the evening, and he's in bed by 11. Next morning, he's up at 3:30 a.m. to do it all over again. Tom Joyner racked up 7 million frequent flyer miles. 7 million just doing this route. Forget, I don't know any time for other travel. 7 million miles over the course of employment at both stations. Why did he do it? In an interview, Joyner said he wanted his family to have the things he never had. So he wanted to give them financial security by doing these 2 jobs every single day, one in Dallas and one in Chicago. He wanted to provide for their financial security, is willing to pay a tremendous price to do it. His net worth is in excess of $20 million. Unfortunately, last December, he was divorced. So all those things he was working for, he was accused of having an illicit affair. When he had time, I can't imagine. Maybe it was a stewardess, I don't know. But all those things he was working so hard for, gone. You know, sure, he's got a net worth over $20 million, and sure, his salary was in excess of $700,000. But what good was it? Now he's still there. You can look him up. I mean, he's still on the radio. Whether conscious or not, we also dread that one day when we won't have enough. Tom Joyner was working so hard because he thought someday, hey, the bottom's going to fall out, and I'm not going to have enough money. It's called scarcity mentality, and that's what Tom Joyner had. He felt he couldn't work hard enough. He needed more and more. And some of us had that same scarcity mentality, thinking, you know, maybe today I got enough, but down the road I'm not gonna. Jesus mentions money more than any other subject in the Bible. Over 2,000 references to money are found in the Bible. 15% more than heaven and hell combined. Is Jesus saying that the rich have very little chance of making it into God's kingdom? Absolutely not. You look at some of the people in the Bible, and you look at how they were doing financially, starting with Abraham and all his flocks and the riches he had. Isaac, Jacob, David, King David, doggone. Solomon, his son, tremendous amount of wealth. Job, remember all the riches that Job had. Paul came from a very rich home. We saw that a few weeks ago. God still used every single one of those. But the belief at the time among Hebrews was if God had given all these things to a certain amount of people, the rich people, they were automatically going to go to heaven. Because, hey, look how rich they were on earth. So that was a standard thought among the Hebrews at the time, that rich people were just automatically going to go to heaven because they were blessed so much materially on earth. If you will, open your Bible, and we're going to look at some verses. We're going to look at starting with Luke chapter 12, verses 16 to 21. Luke chapter 12, verses 16 to 21. I didn't skip that, did I? Oh, I did. All right. Tim's giving me a look. I skipped a whole section. I skipped an entire page. Let me put this underneath. We're gonna hold your finger in there. Hold your finger in there. Okay. I don't know how I did that. We're going to look at a quick video called Money Rant. Now you're going to look at this when it's over, and you're going to say, "Wait a minute, I don't get it." Think about what this gentleman is saying. Think about, and we'll pontificate on it in a minute. A 180 on a 360. Got to think about that a minute. at least I did, and say, what the heck's he talking about? But who owns everything? Who does it really all belong to? You can play Monopoly and win every property on the Monopoly board, but at the end of the game, all that stuff goes back in the box. We perceive the good life as an abundance of bigger and better things. But we forget who owns them. My sister-in-law, my brother, I've got a brother, besides the one in Phoenix, I got another second brother who lives in China. And my brother went out there a number of years ago, really liked it, stayed, married a Chinese gal. She's an assistant headmaster at a public school. She makes $6,000 a year. Been doing this a long time, $6,000 a year. The headmaster is what you try to get the job you try to get to do. So the headmaster at her school got promoted to a different school. So the job was open. They offered the job to her. So she went in, and she says, wow, $6,000 a year, I'm going to get a pretty good raise. She would have got a raise to over $20,000. However, this is in China. She turned the job down. And I said, turn the job down, 20 grand. I mean, in China, if you're a headmaster, you get to decide who you're going to buy the copy equipment from, who you're going to get all the paper goods from, any school supplies that are required. It's all bribe. We saw that bribes and corruption thing a minute ago. In China, that's the standard. The state's not giving her that $20,000. It's all coming from, most of it is coming from vendors that she's supposed to do business with, and then they give her a kickback. She turned the job down. She decided she wouldn't do it. But that is commonplace. There's a reason why intelligent people humiliate themselves on reality TV. Why Americans own billions of dollars on their credit cards and work to the detriment of health and family. Our culture is infected with a disease called affluenza. You're kidding me. Is it time already? It is. In 1918, influenza was rampant in the United States. 548,000 Americans died of influenza. But affluenza is much more contagious. It's at epidemic proportions right now. And it's way worse than as terrible as influenza was. Some of the symptoms of affluenza: never content with what we have, always wanting more. There's someone that's very close to me, who I would never embarrass that person by giving the name, but it's whatever they have is never enough. Whether it's a boat, motorcycle, car, all these things, but they're never content. They always are looking to buy something else. That's one reason eBay does so good. But never content with what we have, always wanting more. Another one is unwillingness to settle for less than the best. Got to have the best. Got to have the number one thing. Got to have all the options on whatever I buy. Got to be the best. Mercedes-Benz has a new commercial line out that you might have seen on TV, the best or nothing. The best or nothing. So I buy the Mercedes, I got the best. Well, Lexus or some of these other companies might have something to say about that. But it's a mindset. It's got to be the best or nothing. Another symptom of influenza: an insatiable drive to be successful without ever experiencing real contentment. Working so hard, a insatiable drive to be successful, and never really getting there, never being happy. Making your goals, getting to whatever you mean. Maybe it's a job. It could be several categories, but never really getting contentment or happiness once you reach that. When the company I was working for, we used to have a saying: no good sale will go unpunished. And I can think of a very nice young man, was in Oklahoma, and he made a $500,000 sale to the Hurst Corporation. Now, this was a long time ago, but that time, that was a phenomenal amount. It still is a phenomenal amount of money. But at the time, it was one of the larger sales our company ever made. And the commission on that was great. He was a very good sales rep. However, and he knew this, the next year, any sale that you made went onto your sales quota. So if he had a $1 million sales quota for this year, next year, after that $500,000 sale, it goes up to $1.5 million. What's the chance he's ever going to make another $500,000 sale? not so good. No good sale shall go unpunished. Unfortunately, he lasted about 3 years with that over his neck and ended up leaving the company. Now, that may not be a good example. He had an insatiable drive to be successful. He made his goal, but obviously the rules were such, and he knew the rules, where he never was happy. I had a friend in college, and he had a saying, it only costs a little more to go first class. This is in college, but none of us had any money. His parents were very rich. So he drove a GTO. He had really nice stuff. Right now he's got 7 kids, and he's going coach. He's learned that you can't always all your life go first class. Choosing career over family. Boy, there's one that can get in the way, where you work so hard and you're put in so many hours that your family suffers. There are many other reasons. These are just some of the symptoms of affluenza that's contagious in our country. As we work to accumulate more, the stress it produces strains our health and our relationship with family and friends. Money and things can become a primary motivator driving our life's decisions. Why do we do things? We do things for more, to get more money, to get a better standard of life, as I said, Jesus mentions money more than any subject in the Bible, over 2,000 references. Now, you've got your finger still, I hope, on Luke chapters 12, verses 16 to 21. We're going to look at a couple of verses. This is one of my favorite parables. Jesus, I didn't realize it until doing the study, but when Jesus told a parable, he normally did not explain it to the people. He explained it to his disciples. But most of the time, when he talked to people, he talked in parables, and he didn't always explain it to them. Then Jesus told them this parable. I'm in Luke chapter 12, verses 16. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. In other words, retire. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich toward God. That's the last verse. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich toward God. This man had planned for every contingency. He worked hard. He saved. He invested. All good things. All good things. But his priorities didn't include God. He invested nothing for his heavenly future. You're thinking, easy for him to say, he didn't have a mortgage, or my medical bills, or kids in school, or parents to take care of, or a boss like mine, or maybe you're unemployed. It's easy to say that stuff for the guy that's got all the fields and more crops than he can handle. But remember, the key word there is for themselves. He wasn't investing anything for God. Take a look at Matthew chapter 6, verses, insert your 401k or your investment plan into this parable of the rich man. And how much difference do you see between him and you? He had all these crops. He had these barns he put in. You're investing, hopefully saving up something for you when you can retire, if that works out. But what difference is there between the rich man and you? Are you investing anything for your heavenly future? Matthew chapter 6, verses 20 and 21. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart is also. You've heard that verse 100 times. Do you believe there's a next stage in life? And if you do you act like it? Are you investing anything for that next stage in life? Or you just kind of say, I'm throwing the dice. I'll see what happens. How much is Bill Gates worth 5 minutes after he dies? And I'm not picking on Bill Gates. He does a lot of good stuff with his money. But how much is Bill Gates worth 5 minutes after he dies? All those pieces go back in the box. It doesn't mean anything. Bless his heart. I hope Bill Gates has got God as a priority in his life. Take a look. We're going to look at a few more parables. Matthew 13, verses 1. Matthew chapter 13, verse 1. These are parables relating to heaven. Jesus talks about heaven. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him, he actually had to get into a boat. He sat in the boat. People got around this cove, and he talked to them while he was in the boat. All the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he scattered the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it. Some fell on rocky places, where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still, other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop of 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear. The disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? He replied, the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. Verse 14, in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. And verse 15 is a really important one. For this people's hearts have become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they've closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understand it with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, the disciples now. Blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For I tell you the truth. Many prophets and righteous men long to see what you see, but do not see it, and to hear what you hear, but do not hear it. You look at our country, and you can almost put the United States in this picture. You know, we've got eyes, we don't see the truth. We've got ears, we don't hear the truth. We don't follow what God is telling us in His Word. Verse 18. Listen to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. That's the seed sown on the path, the wide path that's beaten down with so many people walking on it. Everybody takes the path if they can. They're not going to go through the brush. That's what happens when you walk when the seed is thrown on the path. The one who received the seed that fell on rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since it has no root, it lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution come because of the word, not when trouble or persecution come, but when it comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. And verse 22, the one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. So what are the thorns? What does it say? The worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it. The thorns choke the seed, making it unfruitful. But the one who has received the seed that fell on good soil is the man who hears the word and understands it. He produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him. Explain to us the parable of the wheats in the field. He answered, the one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out his kingdom, everything that causes sin, and all who do evil. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who has ears, let him hear. We see that again and again in Jesus' talking. Picture this. A first century Hebrew walks along a road, dusty road. He's going from his home into the village because he needs food for his animals. He ran a little bit low. It's a long way. It's a hot day. And as was the custom of the day, you didn't have to take the path. You could walk across someone's field. That was acceptable. So that's what he's doing. He's got a long way to get to the village. He's popping along. He goes along his field, and all of a sudden he sees something sticking out. He goes over to it, pops it away, pops the top up. There's a treasure inside. He found a treasure. In those days, there weren't banks. There were bankers because you could get a loan. But they didn't have banks. So if you had money or if you had something of value, you could bury it somewhere. You could hide it. But with a lot of the wars going on and a lot of the heathens, different people coming into the country, you might have land one day and hey, you'd be 50 miles away the next day, and or 100 miles, that land would be gone. But what was hidden in the land. And if you ever see Fargo, there's a scene in the movie Fargo where some guy, one of the malcredants, is burying the treasure. And it's in the middle of a snowstorm, and there's a blizzard out there, and he parks his car, and he runs across, and there's a fence with all these posts. And he sees a post, and he digs it, and he puts his buried treasure to hide the treasure, covers it with snow. Looks to the right, looks to the left, there's nothing but fence. He's hiding the money where he's never going to find it again. Now, when I read this parable, I always thought, this is verse 44, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went, sold all he had, and bought the field. I was never comfortable with that parable. I'm thinking, doggone, this is Jesus telling the parable. Shouldn't the guy knock on the door and say, I found something in your field you may want to know about? You know, there's a treasure out there. But no, he buries it, and he goes and buys the field. Well, under rabbinic law, if a workman came on a treasure in a field and lifted it out, it would belong to the field's owner. But here, the man is careful not to lift the treasure out until he's bought the field. So then it was legal because he hadn't lifted the treasure out. He just saw what it was, left it in there, and under rabbinic law, that was absolutely acceptable. The focus of the parable is on the value of the treasure. When the man buys the field, regardless of cost, he gains far more than the price he paid. We minimize the gospel if we only look at the surface of the field. But if you look deeper in Scriptures, you uncover the treasure of Christ, which is eternal life, and the power to live your life in the here and now. That second part we don't think of so much. We're thinking of salvation, but the power to live your life in the here and now. I bet you there's not a single person in here that hasn't got some real issues in their life right now. It could be employment, some financial, could be health-wise, could be something with a family member. But seeing that treasure, selling all we have of our lives, and reprioritizing things can get us to that point. The kingdom of heaven is worth infinitely more than the cost of discipleship. And for those who know where the treasure lies, consider reorganizing everything in your life to secure it. He goes on to tell a few more parables about heaven, verse 45. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away, sold everything he had, and he bought it. And he goes on in 47 to talk about the fish in the net. In verse 51, Jesus says, have you understood all these things? To disciples. They say, yes, they replied. They did understand. These verses tell us how to live our lives. Jesus is waiting for us, but if we're not searching for him, we'll miss that pearl of life. Our quest for more stuff can get in the way of that search. 2 Corinthians 4:18 says, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. That's one of my favorite verses. So how do we manage our finances and stay consistent with God's plan? How do we manage our finances and stay consistent with God's plan? First, recognize the source of your anxiety, of your financial anxiety. Turn to Matthew 6, verse 25. Yeah. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Verse 27. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? O you of little faith. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink? What shall we wear, or what shall we drive? It's a gal I used to work with that she felt every 3 years she had to buy another car. But the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them, except the car. But seek first his kingdom and righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble on its own. Amen? 1 Timothy 6:17-19 says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good. This is in 1 Timothy 6:17-19. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, generous and willing to share. And this way they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. And that's for the here and now. Second, how do we manage our finances and stay consistent with God's plan? Second, live as though you have faith in God's provision. There was a guy that Sue and I knew when we lived in St. Louis. Funny, some things just really stay on your mind. This was a man who had nothing. He was an electrician, had a hard time finding work. He drove an old Volkswagen Beetle convertible. The top was broken. You know what? And he had I can't remember how many kids. He had a bunch of kids. And he was the happiest man I think I ever knew. He always was happy. In wintertime, you can imagine what wintertime's like in St. Louis. The top of his Volkswagen convertible, this is an old Beetle, it was broken. So the top was down. I imagine he had to shovel out his car some days to get to church. The kids would be in back all bundled up. He and his wife would be there, and he'd be zipping off to church. The truly happiest guy I think I ever knew. Strong Christian. Regular guy. His clothes were kind of tattered. He always needed a haircut. But who cares? I mean, that didn't matter. He had these verses figured out. He knew where his future was going to be. Live as though you have faith in God's provisions. God promises to meet our needs, but not necessarily our wants. Just because you have faith doesn't mean you'll get a better car or a bass boat. God promises to give us what we need, but for most of us, God's provided more than enough to meet our needs, but we're spending too much on our wants. Third, refuse to base your happiness on possessions. Luke chapter 12, verse 15 says, watch out, be on guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Be on guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Someone said, all I ask is a chance to prove that money can't make me happy. All I ask is a chance to prove that money can't make me happy. Got to think about that. If more stuff brought happiness, you wouldn't see any millionaires. They'd have reached contentment long before the $1 million mark. Howard Hughes, at one time, was the richest man in the world. An article describes him this way. All he ever wanted in life was more. He wanted more money, more fame, more sensual pleasures, more power. He dealt political favors so skillfully that he secretly influenced 2 U.S. presidents. All he ever wanted was more. He was convinced that more would bring him true happiness. Unfortunately, he concluded, you remember the story, he concluded his life emaciated, colorless, with fingernails and grotesque corkscrews several inches long, rotting black teeth, tumors, and numerous needle marks from drug addiction. Howard Hughes died believing the myth of more. He died a billionaire junkie, insane by any reasonable standards. Make a conscious decision to live a simpler life. Don't let money and possessions be the top priority of your life. You don't need lots of stuff to have a happy life. G.K. Chesterton is a Christian theologian born in 1874 in the UK. And he says this, I really thought this was appropriate. There are 2 ways to get enough. One is to accumulate more and more. The other is to desire less. two ways to get enough. One is to accumulate more and more. The other is to desire less. The fourth and last way, replace your materialism with generosity. You remember the old Jack Benny skit where an armed robber approaches Benny and demands, "Is your money or your life?" After a couple of minutes, the robber says, "Well," what does Benny say? "Just a minute, I'm thinking." He hadn't made up his mind. Don't rush me. Be proactive regarding your finances and consider giving more of it away. Generosity is the antidote to materialism. I like that. Generosity is the antidote to materialism. When happiness is measured by what you have, then it can be destroyed by what you lose. When happiness is measured by what you have, it can be destroyed by what you lose. Be generous now instead of waiting until it's all gone. What does Acts 20, verse 35 say? It's more blessed to give than to receive. What do you expect from God? What do you personally expect from God? Are you serious about your relation to Him? God's not asking us to live the life of a pauper. Simplify your life. Examine your coin of the realm. Then let God control materialism in your life. Give it a try for just 30 days. Then evaluate the results. Simplify your life. Try it for 30 days. Let God control materialism in your life. Jeremiah 29, verses 11 through 14. We're just about done. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in the future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord." What a verse. Once we understand that God wants to give us His best, things do start happening. Give the Lord an opportunity for 30 days and watch what happens. What do you have to lose except the priority of materialism in your life? So tomorrow morning, begin that 30-day journey and show me the money will no longer control so many decisions in your life. 2 Corinthians 4:18 says, "So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary. What is unseen is eternal." Last verse. I have to skip that story. Last verse is Matthew 13:15, which we read a minute ago. "For this people's hearts have become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understand with their hearts and turn, and I would heal them." He's just waiting for us to make that change. 1 Corinthians 2:9, "However it is written, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him." We can't imagine what God's got prepared for us if we'll just take that step of faith. Let's close with a prayer.
On behalf of Dan Hurst and the Open Class, we want to thank you for watching. We hope it was a blessing.